Good evening.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Steve. Oh, pretty well. Okay. Let's see. We need some board members. Let's see if I can. We need Antoinette. No. Antoinette usually just observes. So
You need Ashley and Tanya.
yeah. And I've got a whole list of Tanya questions that got answered too. So let's text.
Good evening.
Hey, Ashley.
That's me.
Good. That's two board members now. All right. So we just need Tanya. And okay. Meeting now. Let's see if I get a response from that. All right. In the meantime, let's introduce ourselves. Dave, we'll start with you. You're muted.
Hi, Dave Rizal, parent of a student at LFJ.
David Warner, Board of Education member. Lisa.
Lisa Raymond, Assistant Superintendent for Business.
Steve. Good to see you, Steve, or hear you. Ashley.
Ashley Pineda, Board of Education trustee and father of two.
James.
Jim Wadig, BBS Architects, project architect for Greenburgh Schools.
Good. Deborah.
Community member and ECP caseworker.
Chris.
Chris Vallon and parent of two.
Good. Jessica.
Jessica Muldoon, parent of a kindergartner. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Carol.
Carol Allen, community member, Hartsdale.
Katie.
Hi, Katie McGee, parent of a sixth grader.
Tanya.
Tanya Dragic, trustee.
Laser.
Laser Alert, network administrator.
Amy.
Amy's having some technical difficulty she's trying to work out.
Okay. Patricia.
Patricia Weems, president of Fairgrounds Civic Association. If anybody ever needs flowers, Creative Designs would be your florist, and that's me.
Very good. Amy, are you able to talk yet?
I could use some flowers. I'm just kidding.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Oh, Amy Ashley Moore, District Treasurer. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Diane.
And this is Hugh McCauley on Diane's screen, and I could use some flowers too, Pat, if this doesn't work out.
All right, Lorraine. Hello. He's trying. Hey.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Okay. I think that was it. Fred.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. Megan.
Hi, Megan Hack, a parent of 2 kids in the district.
Very good. All right. First order of business. See if I can learn to share screen here. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you do something so I can share the screen?
Yep, hold on one second.
Or you can do it, I don't care.
All right, you should be all set.
Okay, let's see here. Boom. Okay, so there's our agenda. We're now up to review and adopt meeting notes, which means I need to get out of this and into the meeting notes. And if this will just, well, that went a little further back than I wanted. Okay. And 22. Our last meeting was on the 11th. The attendees are as listed. We talked, Lisa Raymond talked to us about budget development and the availability of draft 1 of the budget, which is up on the website. Concerns with the governor's budget proposal and a possible letter writing campaign to encourage people to do something about it if they want to. Our recommendation to put Prop 1 on the ballot again this year, allowing up to $3 million. Any excess unallocated funding that we saved goes into the repair reserve or capital reserve. Okay. Discuss the facility status with Mike Falcone. The most of the big news was centered around RJ Bailey. We were going to try and fix the ventilation motor for the gym. And most other things were on hold due to snow. We'll hear about that tonight. What the latest and greatest is on that. We talked about, we mentioned that the plan for the car wash expansion next door to RJ Bailey, they're required to put in some vegetation on the line in between. I think it's maple and linden trees, so we don't have to do anything about that. That should happen on its own. The town board approved their half of the playground at RJ Bailey, and caretaker's house. We're waiting on the asbestos removal permit. We talked about facilities needs with BBS architects. That was the main event, I think. So we had a phase 1, which was related to keeping the air clean and various things that you would have to do if you did anything to a building. And I think the big thing was the RJ Bailey, all of those air units in each of the classrooms. And we'll look again at everything, but it'll be slightly revised tonight. Phase 2, I think the biggest piece, structural issues, masonry, lintels, all that. The biggest issue, I think, was the high view roof. Energy performance contract, which was supposed to be self-funding, and the proportions of that would take out items in the BCS. I guess about 3.8 million worth of BCS items we estimated might go into that contract. We do that. Then we answered a bunch of questions regarding the facilities and the facilities plan, what we could do and could not do with the mansion. We couldn't just go off and sell it. We could. There was a list of possible uses built into the deed from the Warburg family. We talked about possible mechanical ventilation for the ECP building, and that's an ongoing issue. We'll revisit a lot of this stuff tonight. We talked about classroom ventilation. It looked like we were putting ECP ventilation into the mansion, but the plan from the administration is to keep the ECP kids that are at Jackson in Jackson, and the kids in Highview need to go somewhere. So the main thing is to get the ECP main building up and running again. So that's one of the causes for the change in the recommendation from PBS. We'll see a revised version tonight. Major outstanding issues. We need to offer facilities walkthroughs and gather extensive public feedback for, I guess, phase 2 and beyond, because phase 1, we have enough money set aside or slated to be set aside to not need a bond. Everything's coming off of our building conditions survey, the $89 million universe from which we're drawing the highest priority items. And we can kind of go forward with that. And there's a need to do that quickly. Phase 2 may require a bond. And as a result of that, then people are going to be looking at that very closely and carefully. I don't anticipate doing that this year, but in a future year, we'll see what happens to the economy and the housing market and how people come out from under the economic disaster that went with COVID. And then we'll determine what we're going to do in terms of a bond and timing. Some committee members favor consolidation of all ECP classrooms to Lee F. Jackson. And there were some ideas about whether we should be putting in trailers, but trailers take too long and all of that sort of thing. Others wish to dedicate all facilities funding to repairs of existing facilities. We'll try and reach consensus on something that we can present to the board as a recommendation. If we have to, we can do a roll call vote, but we could also come up with a recommendation that forwards the issue onto the Board of Education. So that's where that is. Our goal is to get to the March 2nd board meeting with some sort of recommendation, and BBS showing up for that. And that's why we scheduled this meeting, to make sure that our recommendation was kind of up to date and we've resolved as many issues as we could. Meeting adjourned at 8:45 p.m. Now, does anybody see anything that it's important that I left out of the minutes there? Anything that needs to be corrected? Do I hear a motion to adopt these minutes as presented?
So moved.
Do I
Second,
hear a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? It's done. Minutes. Okay. Now moving on. Out of this. Back to the agenda. Okay, finance. Lisa Raymond, you are up. We
Okay,
have a school. Okay, go ahead.
nope, thank you, David. So I have met with all of the administrators, and I have met also with Dr. Chase and Dr. Reynolds to go over the budget development for draft 2, with the understanding that the board would like to see the tax levy increase by no more than 2%, which we have done. We're working on draft 2 to be presented at the board meeting next week. There are no updates on the governor's state aid numbers at this time. They're still working on that in Albany. So we have nothing new to report there, as well as Dr. Chase has the copy of the letter writing campaign that I gave to her. And I forgot to ask her about that today, but I will make sure that I do ask her tomorrow when I speak with her, if that letter is okay to be put on the website for people to send to our legislature. I did attend a meeting with the Southern Westchester business officials where there were at least 12 different legislators and or their representatives to hear our concerns. I know that Dr. Chase and Mr. Williams attended a meeting the day before we all did. We went with our own concerns, our own PowerPoint, and to express the costs of the COVID expenses and how they were going to help us fund those, as well as the recommendations that the governor has in his budget proposals. So they're very much aware of what everybody is thinking. Yes, Tanya?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm sure I'm going to forget afterwards. I was just reading about the details of the new stimulus package, which I understand has yet to be approved. But I understand that there's quite a bit of aid in there for schools. And I'm just wondering if you know if that aid would come through the states or if it would actually be federal aid. I was just curious how that might trickle down to us.
Well, if there is stimulus money, it will come from the federal, whether it goes to the state and then the state can decide how to distribute that, and or is the federal government going to decide how to give that to schools? That's still to be determined.
Okay.
For example, the CARES Act money that was given to schools last year, if you remember on the state aid schedule, it was subtracted as pandemic, but then added back. So the money was given to the state and then the governor distributed that. Those CARES Act monies were separated in two different categories, which we have already filed for those monies, and that is what the state is working on right now. If you go on the state ed website, a division that we can go under Greenburgh and most of the Westchester schools, it says everybody is still under review.
Got it. Thank you.
I would assume that's exactly what would happen with new pandemic money.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
So just to follow up on Tanya's point, I had also been figuring that in the unlikely event that the CARES Act money would go directly to the school districts, should we consider changing the resolution for Proposition 1 to a higher number? Like I said, in the very unlikely event that the money would come directly to us and we might have, well, no, because those additional leftover funds would be from this school year, not next school year.
Correct.
Never mind. Answer my question.
Okay. That's okay. The resolution for Proposition 1, the wording would be very similar to what it was last year. And that will just be the second proposition on the ballot. We are developing the timeline for the budget hearing, budget vote, and those dates are set, but for all of the budget presentations so that we can hit as many taxpayers as possible. As far as the ERS and TRS reserves are concerned, we currently have $1,448,319 in the ERS reserve. A TRS reserve was approved and created last year that school districts could establish those. You can't put more than 2% of the previous year's salaries into a TRS reserve of the administrators and teachers, and the aggregate balance cannot exceed 10% of those total salaries from the preceding year. I contacted our district council to ask for wording for that proposition, which she has given to me. But she informed me that last year the district was proposing that a TRS sub-fund be created and that ER monies be placed in this TRS sub-fund. So that is what I've created here. Out of the $1,448,319, we could put $553,300 into a TRS reserve, and then I would leave the remaining balance in the ERS reserve, because this $895,000 that would be left over is approximately what we would be spending next year for our ERS reserve. So that would leave nothing to be put into the repair reserve as extra monies.
Okay, so
I'm
there's
just
our answer.
making sure. So this is a dead idea now, because we kind of were hoping that we could transfer some into the repair reserve, but you're saying now that we can't.
Well, it's not that you can't. You could if you wanted to. It's my recommendation that you don't if you want to create the TRS reserve, because then that would leave either ERS or TRS underfunded.
Okay.
Questions on that? Okay.
Could you explain the purpose of the TRS sub-fund, please?
Right.
Well, I think what she means by a TRS sub-fund is just, it would be Because there's so much money in the ERS reserve, it would be a sub-fund under an ERS reserve that has already been created, because TRS reserves are new reserve, is the newest of the two reserves.
Could you remind me what these
Teachers
acronyms mean
versus
again?
non-teachers.
Sure. ERS is Employee Retirement System, and that is for all civil service employees. TRS Reserve is Teacher Retirement System, and that is for anyone who is certificated, which would be administrators and teachers and teacher assistants.
Okay.
If we create that sub-fund as a specified set of employees, let's say, then we don't have to go with a proposition?
We do, no, you still have to do a proposition
would be
to
a different
establish
proposition.
it.
I didn't understand what the purpose of the sub-fund was. Would you restate that once again, please?
The purpose of the sub-fund would be so that we could put monies from the ERS reserve into a TRS reserve, a sub-fund, so that we could allocate monies to pay for those retirement costs.
I think I'm having the same trouble as Carol. But
yeah.
if we have a sub-fund, then why do we need to have a proposition to create that reserve fund? I guess
Because I can
you
tell
can-
you that when we account
Right
for the
away.
money to State Education Department, to the Office of the State Comptroller, they are in two separate categories, and they'd have to be in two separate accounts.
So is the sub-fund then just as a way to move the monies immediately instead of waiting for the proposition to pass and officially create its own reserve fund?
Correct. It wouldn't need a proposition to move the fund, to create the sub-fund. It can be created by board approval, and money can be moved into there from the ERS reserve. And when money is expended from there, it is by board approval.
So can we leave it like that, or you're saying that once you check that we're obligated to officially create a reserve fund for TRS? We can't leave it as a sub-fund so that movement of monies is just with board approval. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So if we needed to pay for our TRS obligations, which usually TRS comes out of your state aid, but because we don't get or collect a lot of state aid in those areas, we always have to make a contribution of some sort. I wouldn't be able to take the money out of the ERS reserve to pay for TRS if TRS hasn't been established as a reserve.
So we currently don't have a TRS reserve, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
Right,
I'm
so
assuming I'm going to see
this is kind of
an
a
agenda item from that.
temporary solution until we create the TRS, is what you're
Right.
saying.
And
Okay.
so once the TRS is created, then the monies will move out of the sub-fund and the sub-fund will be deleted, just to.
Right.
the
And
name.
we'll have
Okay.
we'll have an ERS reserve and a TRS reserve.
Right, just to close the circle. Thank you.
So do we now have to have a resolution to be approved by the board to create the TRS reserve?
Yes, we will, and our attorney will give us that wording. She'll create that resolution for us.
Does that also need the public notice before it's on the ballot?
It won't be on the ballot.
Not on the ballot.
It does not need to be on the ballot. It's a reserve that is established by the Board of Education. It has nothing to do with the resolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
The board resolution. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, are we
Now,
good?
one more question, please.
Go for
Is a separate action necessary in order to fund the reserve once it is created?
It will all be in one resolution to establish the reserve and to fund it up to a certain dollar amount. And they could say not to exceed $550,000, let's say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the capital fund versus the capital reserve issue. So I spoke with Ivy Kraus, the district clerk, to pick her brain to find out if she could ever remember that the board established a capital reserve fund. A capital reserve fund is established by voter approval. It would have to be a proposition on with the ballot. So you'd have the proposition for the budget, and then you could have a separate proposition asking the public, can we establish a capital reserve fund? And as long as the voters say yes, then you would ask the voters, in the event that you say yes, that we can establish a capital reserve fund, would you allow us to fund this? And I'm going to give you an example of districts that I've been in previously. Allow us to create a capital reserve fund and over the next 10 years, contribute no more than $5 million. So as long as the voters would say yes to that, what that means is that if there is excess fund balance at year end, then we could put money into that reserve, but it can't exceed a dollar limit that we ask the taxpayers. When the time comes that you want to do a capital project and you have a capital reserve fund, the only way you can get the money out of the capital reserve is by voter approval. So again, that would be, here's the budget proposition. Our second proposition is, we want to do a capital project. Will you allow us to take $2 million out of this reserve to help fund a project? So Ivy confirmed for me that there was never a proposition to establish a capital reserve. So what I think, or I believe that happened was, these monies were set aside for something, were earmarked for something back around 2012, 2013, and were put in a separate line item, okay? And that line item was called capital reserve. I believe that that capital reserve fund money of $257,163.51 should really be part of the capital fund balance, so that the capital fund balance at 6/30/2020 would be the $1.598 million. But on top of that, in speaking with our external auditors, because Ivy had been out, so I went to our external auditors to see if they could remember or recollect anything about a capital reserve, which they did not. I said, well, we at the audit committee this week, we will do a corrective action plan for things that the district were cited on in our audit. And one of the things that we were cited on was that we have on the books 6 capital projects that there was no activity in during the 2019-2020 school year. So they recommend, if there's no activity, those capital projects need to be closed out. The only one,
sorry,
excuse me?
Can you remind us what those 6 projects are? I can think of 4. But
I know one is the repairs to the mansion roof, which that is the only one that is still open, which would be $1.3 million. There were HVAC repairs, there were boiler repairs. I don't remember the last 2, but I can tell you that Mike Falcone.
The plumbing emergency?
The doors?
Yes. And no, not the doors, because the doors, some of the doors haven't been done yet.
The vestibule?
Nope, that's not one of them.
The staircase and the elevator?
Right.
It could be the elevator. Yep. So
there's something with the fire alarms, or was that the safe schools fund?
It wasn't fire alarms, no. I don't have that list with me, unfortunately. But 5 out of the 6 have been completed. So according to our auditors, I said, well, then that means there's $298,760 left over that I'm pretty sure the board would like to keep in the capital fund to put towards a future capital project, which they are talking about now. The auditors said, you can't do that. You have to bring the excess money back to the general fund, excuse me, and then make a resolution that says, we're planning this project. We want to take the money and put it back to the capital fund for this. So it's just, again, a matter of a resolution just to make sure that we do everything, cross our T's and dot our I's.
How much was left over?
It would be $298,759.97. Because of that money there highlighted in yellow, 1.3 is designated for the mansion roof.
Okay. If it's designated, why do we not have it there as earmarked like we have these other projects?
You're probably right. It probably should say that it's earmarked for the mansion roof.
So I'm just a little, first of all, I'm a little troubled that we don't have a capital reserve. And is that like a bad legal thing? I mean, that we have been
No, what I think happened, Tanya, was if you look at our financial statements and the ST3, the state reporting requirements, State Education Department gives us codes for every different type of reserve, like the capital reserve, the repair reserve, those kind of things. This is all what's called the H fund, the capital fund, okay? I think when this was broken out for whatever reason, it was identified as, and I'm sorry, I can't find anything that says what this was identified for, but I think that previous people wanted to show it as something different. There was no more capital fund balance is A909. That's excuse me, H909. That's the code. There's only one H909. It doesn't have H909A or H909B. So they picked H878, which is capital reserve fund, and stuck the money there when really they shouldn't have. What we really should have done was kept an Excel spreadsheet that showed our detail of what went to the H909.
So I'm sorry, I just have another question. So when we had the voters approve last year that any excess would go into, I thought it was going into capital reserve fund, but in fact, where did that excess go?
Capital fund.
Capital
the
fund.
repair
Capital
reserve.
Fund.
Or-
Capital
oh,
fund. Right.
So what is the difference between a repair reserve and a capital reserve then? Because Katie just said repair reserve, so.
Okay, repair reserves are exactly there for that, repairs, improvements, okay? Capital reserve is for construction.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
So so that voter approved transfer went into the repair reserve.
Yes, no,
Okay.
Wait, which one? Which one are you
So
talking
last
about?
last May, when we had the budget vote, we had a
Proposition 1.
A proposition that asked the voters to approve that any
put-
remainder would be transferred to, and I guess now I'm understanding that it was in fact the repair reserve and not the capital reserve.
Anything that was right, anything that was over the 4% not to exceed $3 million went to capital. This 1.3 million, I mean, I'm sorry, to the repair reserve fund.
Repair, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The
Okay,
1.3 was a capital transfer in the budget that goes to the capital fund.
Okay, got it. All right.
So the capital reserve fund, which does not officially exist, from what I remember you saying last meeting, is actually more stringent. And you just said to yourself, that needs voter approval to create the fund. It needs voter approval to add money to the fund. It needs voter approval to remove money from the fund for specific projects. So it's very stringent. The capital fund, maybe are we putting money there so we know we have these projects, kind of a list of projects to do, and it's just faster to get the monies in and out? Is it?
Okay, so even with the capital fund, I believe, and I would ask Fred to confirm this for me, I would still ask the taxpayers to approve what's in the capital fund for this project that we want to do.
This project is more of a repair though than a capital. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, how do you, I mean, it seems like we're mostly repairing at this point. So I'm on some level, I'm wondering, do we really need a capital reserve? Because mostly what we're doing right now is repairs.
Agreed.
Well, we don't have a capital reserve. We have a capital fund. You want things to go. So when we do the repairs from a repair reserve, we're going to take that money and we're going to transfer it to the capital fund, because that's the way it gets to SED to get approval and to get our building aid.
Okay.
And there are certain items. So for example, if we want to put mechanical ventilation into the ECP main building, I don't think that qualifies as a repair. Am I correct?
I would agree with that.
I would agree, right.
Okay. So we can't put everything in the pot of repair reserve, or else we'll have problems.
Got it. All right.
Correct.
But as far as being stringent on how many times we need to go to the voters before we can spend the money in the capital fund, it sounds to me, just because we're already pushed on timing to get schools ready for September, it sounds to me, and I agree, I think Tanya was saying the same thing, that right now creating a capital reserve fund seems contrary to our immediate needs. Is that, am I thinking correctly, or am I missing something?
I would agree. I think that phase one is that we use the material, the money that we already have in the reserve funds that we do have, not the capital reserve fund, because there isn't one, right? And once we get phase one going, and we get then we wait and see if the economy recovers a little bit, and then to get to phase two and fund phase two, that there'll be some bonding, and then we can piece out how we want to save up money for that funding, or do we want to do it in one shot or in bits and pieces, or how we want to do it, and then that becomes important.
Yeah.
What is the quickest way to approve funding of phase one? Lisa, is it so that basically we don't have to go for voter approval, that basically just the board can approve?
I think that you would still need to go for voter approval, and correct me, Fred, if I'm wrong in my thinking. We need voter approval in order for it to go to SED to get state aid.
Honestly, I'm not sure, Lisa. I've never dealt with a capital fund before. I've only dealt with capital reserves, where you definitely need voter approval. So I'm not really sure.
When we do the filings with SCD to set up the project, and once you go through all the things with facilities planning, etc., and we go to file it, they're going to ask us what date was it voter approved.
Yes.
They're going to want to see a certified voter tally.
Right.
Even for fund money, even for capital fund money, they want a voter approval
For any money that
Yes,
they are going to approve and give you aid on, they want to see an approval date. But it could be general fund money. I mean, it could be in a budget that got approved in a certain year. So it doesn't have to be something that was specific, like a capital reserve. There are other ways to fund that. This is more of a legal question, I think.
Right. Well, and I agree with what Patricia just wrote in the comments, that without voter approval, I mean, this is more for, I would say, for transparency and oversight for the district, and that's the way to verify that we've notified the public that this is what is going to happen.
Well, in the past, when we've done these mini funding projects, we've said X amount will go to new gymnasium floors, X amount will go to this, this, and this. I'm trying to remember, of the money that's currently in the capital fund balance, have we in the past gone and said this money will go to the mansion roof? I honestly can't remember at this point. I'd have to dig through piles of notes.
I believe it did say that this was going to the mansion roof. Yes. You can't put money into a capital fund without telling the taxpayers why you want them to do it. If it's part of your general fund budget in one of the 9,000 codes that says, I want to transfer to the capital fund $1.3 million, it's not just, hey, I've got $1.3 million, I want to stick it in there. You have to tell the taxpayers why and what you're going to spend it on.
So looking at your breakdown here, you have the balances of June 30th was 1.598. Of that, we'll say 1.3 is for the mansion roof. And then you add in 2.222 funds which are set aside in the fund balance. I guess you're subtracting HVAC. You've added an in-fund transfer to capital. I'm not sure.
That was in this year's budget that was passed to put $1,331,000 into the capital.
So the 2.222 and the 1.331 are also officially currently in the capital fund balance?
Yes.
And those are those 2.222 and 1.331. I'm sorry for anyone not looking at the sheet I'm looking at. Those amounts do not have specific projects allocated to them. Is that correct?
The 2.222 was set aside for for capital fund expenditures, and 750 was approved in July of 2020 for HVAC repairs. So I would say available is the 1.472.
I don't believe all of that was spent out though. So, I mean, I think that's.
Hold on.
Correct. That wasn't all spent out. That was what was anticipated to be spent.
So if we take, all right, so your grand total here is 4.094. I'm going to remove the 1.3 for the roof, which we know has had voter approval. That leaves 2.794591, which may or may not have specific projects allocated to it after we remove everything that's earmarked.
Well, the earmarked funds for the playground
already.
Okay, no, I'm looking at, okay, so looking at her sheets, I don't know if you could put that up. I'm adding, so the 1.598, which is the balances of June 30th, plus the 2.222, the funds set aside in the fund balance, removing the 750,000 for the HVAC repairs, adding the 1.331 for the interfund transfer to capital, removing the ECP playground, 102,000, removing the Highview playground, 130,000, removing 75,000 for the RJB playground, and removing 1.3 for the roof equals, if I've done this correctly, $2,794,591.
Correct.
Which may or may not, this is, no, I'm just trying to confirm is, of that money, I don't think any of it has specific projects allocated to it. And you're saying it would be best if we want any SED approval, we have to say that voters have approved X projects for that remaining amount.
It could be what Fred is going to propose for phase 1, phase 2.
So that would have to be on the ballot in May, the approval of these projects for that amount?
That's what we want to spend the money on.
The money on, okay.
So the remaining unallocated amount of the capital fund balance is $2,794,591 after we remove everything that you've listed as earmarked and we remove the roof because it's not listed there as earmarked.
I thought the roof was coming out of a separate
roof was already earmarked.
funding.
Well, it's not listed on any of the, where is it earmarked? It's not, it's still included in the monies unless the monies are coming from somewhere else.
Repair reserve. Is it on the repair reserve side?
I don't see it there. I see mansion roof repairs,
No.
206,000. I don't see 1.3 million. I just want to make sure it's accounted for somewhere.
I didn't think the roof was 1.3 million. Is it really?
Yes.
That's what she said in the general.
Yes, but I'm just wondering if it's coming out of something else because.
But that's where the problem is. The codes and the money are not in agreement. And when you finally do recognize the money is spent, it's without board approval. And then you'll sign off. So I'm just saying, I forgot the lady's name, the treasurer, y'all took her picture off.
Amy.
Amy was stating that everything that's not spent should come back to the general fund. Is that correct, Amy?
No, this is Lisa.
Lisa, thank you, Lisa.
That's okay.
I need your face. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so the $1,598,759, that is earmarked in our audit report. Of those 6 projects, the 1.3 is designated for mansion roof repairs.
Yes.
Okay. We know that hasn't been done yet. We know that hasn't been approved by facilities planning at SED yet. We can't do anything with that until we get the approval and BBS, answers their question. Okay, so that money is designated by our external auditors in the capital fund for mansion roof repairs.
But just like she could not find where the money is,
You've removed the other things there. You've listed the EC, all the playgrounds. I don't understand
Yes,
why we're
it's
not.
just, it was just an oversight on my part. I didn't put the 1.3 as earmarked.
So once we remove the 1.3, that total capital fund line changes to be the 2.794 number I gave. Which would, those monies, sorry to keep repeating myself, would need to have a voter approved project or projects.
Well, like Fred said, you did approve that because that was stated in the budget brochure materials and in the budget that that's what it was going to be used for. And the voters, when they voted yes. So that is now up with SED.
Lisa, are you sure that that 1.3 million isn't like in the general fund or something? Because
it was in the general fund. It was designated to be transferred to the capital fund.
Okay.
See where it's that line there that says 20, no, wait, that's next summer. Wait, no, 2021 interfund transfer to capital. 1.331.
I just always thought we had the 4 million on top of the 1.3 for the roof. So that's why.
No,
Yeah,
I should have.
that's what we said
have,
last time. You said.
Well, and then in my conversations with the external auditors, getting the six capital projects, I should have put the 1.3 as earmarked funds because that is up with SED right now for approval.
And
I have a question.
Inside the budget. Go ahead.
Last meeting, Lisa had put something up and I had taken a photo, so I was just looking back. It said earmarked and it was for the roof, it was 280 something thousand, and then it had the LFJ and Highview doors, and that was earmarked. Do you know the document I'm talking about? February 11th? When we were, that was in the repair reserve.
It's in repair reserve.
It was your whole, right. So where is the 1 point? So if it said funds earmarked for, that was the extra. I know.
That's
I know,
the
I
extra. So it's
the extra
1.3
left over that wasn't in the capital for the roof.
Correct.
Right.
1.3 was coming from the general fund to the capital fund, approved by the voters when the budget was approved, but $286,370 more was needed, and that was being taken from the repair reserve to help fund that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I got confused. That's why.
Can I ask a question, or do you want me to wait? It's on.
Go ahead.
Lisa, explain to me very succinctly, because you said it before and I understood it perfectly. But then when everybody started asking questions, I figured maybe I'm missing something. Anytime you write a code for whatever, it comes back to the general fund. Is that correct? If you want to take money,
no,
money has been appropriated.
If money has been appropriated from the general fund to be put in the capital fund, then we code it in the capital fund.
Right, I'm with you.
Okay, and every fund, the A fund, which is general, H is capital, C is cafeteria, they all have their own codes.
Exactly.
So what I believe happened was the money was set aside for something. And I'm sorry, I don't know what, because I can't find.
It's okay. It's the basic idea. I'm getting it. Go ahead.
Right. I can't find the documentation, but I think that it was just designated on a separate line so that it showed, here's what we have in fund balance. Here's what we've earmarked for this. I'm just going to put it in this code so we know that it's there.
Okay, but how do you get it out of there without board approval? That's where the problem arises.
Okay, so what I believe, because I believe that this was a mistake, an error, not an error, it was just a misclassification. I don't believe it was done intentionally. It would be my recommendation to the board to just say that the capital fund has this much money and there's no money in a capital reserve. Because a capital reserve was never established, it's just all capital fund monies.
Yes.
And a revision, we can do a revision to our state aid figures with the state. There is an option which we've used before after you've submitted your state documentations, and they've been finalized, you can go back and do a revision. So we could go back and do a revision and just say that it was was put in the wrong code by error, and here's
No,
where it should be.
we won't go there. We won't go there, but I'm just saying how I just wanted, when the board comes to the point of asking for money and where it is, if they can't find it, that's the problem. And then when it comes to we who are paying the taxes, we want the money to go where it's supposed to go. So like for the gym, let's use the gym over at Highview. They never put the gym in when it was supposed to go in. And that was $700,000. I'm keeping it at a low number, small numbers. So when do you put it back in so it can be used by the board to do the things that they need to do? But when it's scattered like that, they really have no idea of what they have.
Well, then it would be my recommendation to the board to let's clean this up, get it in the right spots where it should be.
Exactly.
Inform the board, inform the public. Here's what we've done. We've cleaned this up. Here's where it should be. Here's what we have.
Exactly. And then we don't have a problem.
Correct.
Because the money is there. The only problem that arises is, well, the money is there. Why aren't you spending it? And they can't spend it because they don't know where it is.
Carol Allen has her hand up.
So Lisa, could you just come up with just like a recommendation for this? I think that's that's the obvious thing to do, is sort of recommend to the board how this money should be moved around so that it's quite apparent to everyone, what's there and what's available, and have a resolution on that. And I believe Carol Allen has a question. I see her.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you. So I just want to get clarity. You have said we do not have a capital reserve fund, but the green line there says that the capital reserve fund balance is $257,000. Where exactly is that $257,000 residing at this moment?
In the capital fund.
So the capital fund actually is not 1.341. At this time, the capital reserve is actually about 1.6.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, sorry. So just for action points. So we don't need, it sounds like there doesn't need to be an actual action point. No, I take that back. To move the 257 from H878 to H909. Does something need to go to the board, or does something need to go to the state first? Or does nothing need to be done? Because it's a subset right now.
I don't believe anything needs to be done. We'll just clean this up, make sure it gets into the right codes, notify the board in public with documentation, and then and to the public so everybody knows and everybody will be on the same page.
So that could be in one of the March meetings, hopefully.
Correct.
Okay. And then next point, for the remainder of the unallocated, unearmarked capital fund balance monies, I believe you said that, even though I can't think right now of a specific project, that in last year's budget proposal, since the bulk of these monies came from last year's budget proposal with the transfer to capital and the fund set aside, that we said we were going to do X, Y, Z. I'm trying to look at like the Falconer to see what we said. Because we said we'd be using it to do X, Y, Z, which I can't find right now. We don't need to put, you're saying that we don't need to put something specific to the voters for the monies we currently have there?
As long as it was put in the budget and the voters approved the budget and the voters were notified, we want to use the money for this. No, that's enough approval. But I will go back and I will look and try to earmark what
right here in last year's Falconer, we said we were going to transfer to capital funds the 1.331. That was publicized, that was voted on and approved. So that would check that box of notifying the public, correct? Okay, so we're good then. We don't need any further action points
Good.
to get to the community to spend this money. This is where I'm
Right.
trying to go. Okay.
Right.
Now, I
Okay.
think we had, in addition to all the stuff on our agenda, I think Dr. Drogic had some additional finance questions. Do we want to look
Yes.
at those now?
Sure, if that's okay with you,
Okay, just a
certainly.
minute.
So, Dr. Dragic asked me to, for 4 different things. The first question was, are there any term limits on small school bonds, say for 5 million, 10 million, or a $15 million bond? So I spoke with a bond attorney and I spoke with our fiscal advisors. And they told me that the state constitution provides that no school district can issue indebtedness having a maturity longer than the period of probable usefulness of any particular purpose. And that could be 15, 20, or 30 years. You can't go over 30 years, okay? But what school districts try to do since the tax cap was put into effect was that you try to match your probable usefulness that is determined by SCD for building aid purposes with your debt schedule, so that when you're figuring your tax cap, they will mesh together so that you're not asking the taxpayers for more than could be expected, okay? So as far as the cost of the small bonds of these 3 different scenarios, 5, 10, and 15 million. Right now, the going interest rate is approximately 2% on bonds. But they prefaced this with saying that once you come up with a project and we go through all the hoops, we get voter approval, it goes to SED, and then when we can go for the bond, it could take up to a year before we would go out to bid for the bond. So that 2% obviously every day is going to change, and that could change in the future. What typically happens since the tax cap is, let's say we went for a $15 million bond, and let's say that BBS proposes it in 3 different phases. Say phase 1 is going to cost $5 million. I'm not going to go and ask the board to take a $15 million bond immediately, because you have to start paying on that bond within a year. So why would I be paying on a loan if
Until a
I'm
year.
not going to be spending the money? So typically what you do is, if the first phase, which is going to cost $5 million, you take a bond anticipation note for $5 million so that you can start paying for the project. And then once phase 2 starts, say that's another $5 million, you could take the first bond, or excuse me, bond anticipation note, you'd pay the interest on it, and you'd roll that over into a $10 million band. So all you're paying is interest and you're not paying principal yet. And that's important because you don't get building aid until your final cost report is filed with the state education department. So you don't want to be making bond and principal and interest payments, because all of that would have to go to the taxpayers and you wouldn't be getting building aid on it. So it's all a timing issue of when you take the money. If you do bond anticipation notes, and then say once phase 3 starts, then you bond it and you push your payment out for a year, so that when building aid starts coming in, your payment and your aid will be in sync, so that it'll work with your tax cap.
I have a question. From previous experience in a large project which never got off the ground because it was not voter approved, what I was told was that the general rule was that the state tends to classify repairs as having a 15-year window, the addition of a new wing as a 20-year window, and the construction of a new building as a 30-year window.
30, correct.
Is that about how it goes generally, or does it depend on how long lasting the component is, what category it falls in?
That's very basic, and you've got it right. It all will depend on the probable usefulness that SED puts on it, and that will determine how many years worth of aid you'll get, and you want your bond to be in sync with that.
Okay.
How do I
Okay.
raise my hand?
You can, there's a little button towards the bottom menu that allows you to do that if you're not screen sharing.
But you can just
And
speak
then a
up.
little golden hand appears and I get to see that if I can see anything. But I can't see everybody at once because I'm screen sharing. So you're probably better off shouting out.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pat.
Then the question is, because nobody's going to float a 30-year bond in this economy, and you'll be doing good to do it for 5, being realistic. That's 1. 2, how are the schools working together in New York State to pass that public banking act? Because then it's going to change radically.
That's a very good question, and let me look into that. That's a very good question.
Okay. All right. Returning to the list, what haven't we covered yet?
So then, Dr. Dragic asked me on $100,000 worth of home value, what would it cost to the taxpayers? Now, I want to preface this all with, I used the tax rates that are current now, because those are the ones that we know, okay?
Right.
So and I asked our fiscal advisors, could you please give me an amortization schedule that shows what it would be for a 20-year bond at the 2%, with the understanding that I know interest rates are going to change, the equalization rates, all of that's going to change. But if that were to happen, and let's just say we were currently in that situation now, for a $5 million bond, it would be $7.65 per $100,000 of assessed value, $15.29 if it was a $10 million bond, and $22.94 if it was a $15 million bond, okay? So whatever your taxable assessed value is, if you multiplied, divided it by 100,000 and multiplied it by any one of those figures, you'd see approximately what your tax bill would go up if, and I say this again, if, and that's just assuming that we added debt service and didn't take anything else out of our budget. So if we put in a 200, if you look at 3A, $296,955 for principal and interest payment, but didn't cut something somewhere else and we had to add that to the tax levy, that's what the dollar amounts would be, okay? And then in number 4, what would a 2% school budget increase be on a $100,000 home assessed value? And again, I use the same analogy that we wouldn't cut that 2% elsewhere in the budget. It would be $31.86 per $100,000.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. That is really just terrific information. And I'm wondering if you could share it, David. I don't know if you could put this up on the your Google.
I can post it. We're going to have a board meeting,
Yes.
which will have a wonderful, presentation by BAS Architects, and the money is just as important as the architectural project itself. So I think we should incorporate this into the presentation as well.
Yes, absolutely.
You gotta know how much things cost. You gotta know what the things are. You gotta know how long they'll take. So those 3 things. So we're 2/3 of the way there now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I ask for clarity, please? Because I'm not certain from looking at this document whether we're saying that the increase for an individual property would be $1,592 or $1,624, or is that what the new taxes would be, $1,592 or $1,624?
If we were to take take 3A, if we were to take a $5 million bond, and let's say we just went through everything and we had to make our first payment in the 2020-2021 school year, I would have to include $296,955 in the budget. If I couldn't cut that or make accommodations to, for that money, that would have been added to the budget and added to the tax levy. And that $296,955 on just $100,000 worth of assessed value would equal $7.65. So if your assessed value is $300,000, you take the $7.65 times 3 and add that to your current tax bill, and that would give you an idea of what you would pay extra.
So for a $300,000 house, they would be paying approximately $25 a year increase over what they're currently paying?
For the 2020-2021 school year. Because remember,
And
this
every
is
year
being,
after.
this $5 million is being spread out over 20 years.
Right, I understand that. I'm just trying to get clarity of what exactly the increase would be for a homeowner. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions on this?
Just a quick question. What is the average, I guess, home value in our town?
Median's about 625 for a single family house. Of course, it's a lot less if you're in a co-op because they're only paying it at a 60%
Only
rate.
60%. Right.
While 600 might be the median, I believe the average is more like 450.
Okay.
I believe it's gone up. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I think it's gone up this year. So, but anyway, whatever. I think we all have our assessments, so you can just multiply by
35. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, simple examples are necessary for this. Very, very concrete examples that you can read in 14-point type from a distance, because communication is not as as easy as you think it is. So we'll work on that. Okay. So then moving on. Okay, back to the agenda. Great.
It's up to. Nope, down. Isn't it right?
Back agenda.
There you go.
Okay, so moving on to Mike Falcone. Are you here, Mike? Let's see, do we have Mike Falcone in the room? And I don't see him. Well, I'll tell you this. Since it's only been a couple of weeks since the last meeting, very little has changed. So ECP main building is is sitting there empty because due to ventilation. No new issues for Jackson or Highview. RJ Bailey, the big question was, could we get the gym ventilation to work? And when I last talked to Mike on Friday, he said they tried it and they didn't get it to work yet. Okay, so it wasn't a complete replacement of the existing old system. It was let's buy these parts and try and make the other old parts work. And after a week of trying, they had not succeeded yet. He was going to check with them again and get back to us. I will ask him about that and see if he has any new information. But that's pretty much it. Everything else is kind of as it was.
David, when you're asking Mike questions, can you also just find out if we've checked the MER filters to see if they need to be replaced yet in all the buildings? Thank you.
Filters to be replaced. Any other questions for Mike? Done.
I have
Okay.
a question to ask him, but you're on. That's okay.
Go ahead.
Keep going. That's okay.
Go ahead. All right. Which brings us to the facilities project recommendation process. Mr. Fred Seba, as you can see, we had we had worked our way through the initial presentation. We had looked at, determined that ventilation issues kind of came out on top and had to be in phase one. We had, there's some people who are interested in ECP wing. There was an initial version that ranged from 11 to 14 million if we wanted to put 130 students, make room for 130 students at Lee F. Jackson. It was less expensive if it was smaller. We'll see that tonight. What it looks like if we just take a smaller sample of the students that are, I think, currently have been moved to Highview, plus anybody who's working from home. There was a requirement that they put out for a lesser size wing. We'll look at that tonight as well. So the first thing was the revision of phase one, and Mr. Siba, take it from here.
Okay, if you want to give up screen sharing, I'll have Jim Wading pull that up on the screen for us.
Sure. Let's see, stop share.
So what we had discussed last time was there was $475,000 worth of work at the administration building that we decided was not necessary because it was dedicated for the ECP classrooms at the administration building.
Mm-hmm.
So what we decided was that we would pull that out, and then the committee had asked us for recommendations as to what we would put in its place. So you'll see this chart, which looks very similar to the chart last time, but what we changed in that, if you go back up for a second, Jim. So the high school, middle school, that 115,000, we added 25,000 to that. And that was for some fire rated windows at the high school that we felt should be in phase one. So we added that in. And then the other thing that we did was in Highview, that was, we added $450,000. So again, the 450 plus the 25 makes up the 475 that we took out. We added some of the Highview roof under phase one. So if you recall, the Highview roof is in the worst condition of any of the roofs in the district.
Yeah.
And we felt that it should be prioritized. So we felt that this was a good option for us now to be able to pull some of that money from phase two and move that into phase one, because we knew that the boards and the facilities committee's priorities, one of them was building envelope, making sure that your buildings are tight, making sure that you maintain them. So that's what we did basically in phase one. We took the money out of, and you see the administration building is 18,500. We reduced that by the 475, and then we moved that 475 into those two line items, the 525 at Highview and the 115 at the high school, middle school. So
just
that's
for
basically the difference in the chart from last time.
Anybody who wasn't here last time, could you go over what the columns mean?
Sure. So phase one, we talked about overall approximately a $5 million project, a little bit over, utilizing your repair reserve and your capital fund. And they totaled up a little bit. I think it was about 5.2 million roughly. So we talked about using that 5.2 million and coming up with a project. So that's what that phase one represents. Architectural, ARCH represents architectural items out of the building condition survey report. MEP represents mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or engineering items out of the building condition survey report. And then you'll see the total of those two. The EPC is where we talked about an energy performance contract. And again, that's something that saves energy and pays for itself out of the energy savings. So it's not any kind of a burden to the taxpayers or increase in the tax rate. So talked about that last time. We see about 3.8 million in the building condition surveys that definitely would fit into an energy performance contract, and probably another 1.5 to 2 million in there that would probably fit into an energy performance contract depending upon the scope. So that's what those columns are representing. And then we scroll down a little bit into phase two. Then the committee said, okay, suppose we wanted to do a $5 million bond referendum at a later date. What would you, BBS, recommend be in phase two? So there were only a couple of changes in here. The high school, middle school used to be zero. So we added $450,000 worth of roof work into the high school, middle school. That is the second worst roof that you have in the district. That is only partial. That is not the entire roof. That is partial roof replacement. So we would go in and determine the worst section, and we would do $450,000 worth of work in that worst section. Highview down below is where we pulled that money out of. We put 450,000 of that into phase one.
Mhm.
We moved it up into the top schedule there. So we reduced that dollar amount by 450,000. So that's basically what we did to just move money around. We felt that the roof work was a very high priority. Again, maintaining your building envelope. Roof leaks lead to a number of different unwanted things. Structural damage, they lead to mold, they lead to indoor air quality issues. And I think the committee felt the same way as far as building envelope and keeping that tight. So that was our recommendation, to move the money around. Now, down at another question that was asked, and I don't know why it doesn't appear. Maybe it's on the next page, Jim? Yeah, there it is. Oh, went to the next page. So it says EEB items account for 3.7 million. I believe Tanya had asked this question. So EEB is evaluation of existing building. That's a form that we have to fill out when we send any project to the State Education Department. And on that form are a list of questions regarding particular items that are not grandfathered in. They're items that you have to do. You do not have a choice. So even if you were doing tennis courts, they would make you bring the nurse's office toilet into compliance with ADA standards. They don't give you a choice. They'll look at your floor plan and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, it's not accessible. You need to make that accessible. So about 3.7 million out of 3.75 million out of that 5 million are projects that would be checked non-conformance on the EEB form. So those are projects that you don't have a choice. You have to do those. The state is going to force you to do them if you do any work at any of these buildings. So
could you scroll up so we can look at the items that are double starred?
Yeah, so you'll have to go into the report when we get into the actual line items. They'll show, let me see if you scroll down. Does this building have any, Jim?
This is the admin.
No, I don't think we have.
Ours for repair reserve, right?
So R was for reserve. There's an EEB there. So that's a structural item. You have glazing that needs to be replaced. You can't have plate glass in a school building. That's one of the questions on the form. So that you're not going to be allowed to leave that in place after any projects that you do. That will show as a non-conformance. They will pick that up and they will force you to do that. So you'll see now we've modified all of these and we've shown EEB next to any of the items in phase one that would be a requirement from the State Education Department. So it's about 75% of the items in phase one are things that you really don't have any choice on that you're going to have to do.
Okay.
Bailey was the biggest building, if you have that, if you can pull that up, Jim. So there's the EEB's $3 million on the unit ventilators.
Right.
And that's because you had fresh air introduction at one point and you have not maintained that equipment. That equipment has fallen out of disrepair and you now no longer have fresh air. So they're saying that's not grandfathered in. You had it, you didn't maintain it. So in this building, now again, EEB items do not include anything that's considered grandfathered in or pre-existing non-conforming. So what you will not see on here is the mechanical ventilation for the ECP building. I did not identify that as an EEB form because it would not be a non-conformance.
Right. I'm fine as long as we do it.
Okay, it's in there, but I didn't go it as an EEB form.
Okay.
So when you go back to the overall chart, Jim.
Yeah.
Sorry to make you jump back and forth here. So if you scroll down, we had the items that were not included in the scope. So now if you stop for 1 second, Jim, go back up a little bit. So we got 3.6 million roughly out of the $5 million. So what we said last time is, okay, We have a little bit of headroom left if you're going to do a $5 million bond referendum. There are a lot of items that are not included in here. So if you scroll down a little bit, Jim, these are the ones that we had identified. Number one is the admin building. That is basically the ventilation in the mansion, in the administration building, the 1.5 million. High school, middle school in the 78 edition was built with operable windows and an exhaust system. So they don't have mechanical ventilation in there. And I know you guys are prioritizing COVID and ventilation. So we put that in as for consideration. At Bailey, you have a classroom that was created in the auditorium balcony, which is an old hallway. And that does not have fresh air. So that's $100,000. Highview, again, all the classrooms were built with operable windows and an exhaust system, natural ventilation. So we put that there for your consideration. And then we also mentioned the high school, middle school. If you wanted to continue to do additional roof work, we can chip away at that. You could do 400,000 or 800,000 or 600,000, whatever you wanted to do in roof work there, and continue to chip away at that $1.4 million that we have left in that bond. So that's basically what we wanted to, we talked about it a little bit last time. We said, okay, that's great. Go back, revise phase one, which we've done. And we put the roof work at Highview basically in there because that's a strong recommendation. Again, worst roof in the district. And then we moved some of the high school roof up into phase two. So this is kind of the discussion, part right here as to, how you want to prioritize. We have about, 1.6 million, the administration building, if you wanted to provide fresh air in there. I heard some people were talking about that as a priority. We could fit that whole thing basically in there. Very close.
I think that we should ask the high school if you had your choice between the 1.2 million and the 1.5 million, because what the 1.5 million does, you think it's for the administrators, but what it also does is it cleans out space in the high school.
Yes.
Now, space may become less important as COVID goes away, but right now, space is very important. So it may be they would want the 1.2, and it may be that they would want the 1.5. How do I identify the high school, middle school FAI 78 items?
78 edition. So that's the 1978 edition at the high school. And that edition was built with operable windows and an exhaust system, not unit ventilators or air handling units like the rest of the building was. So that's the only area of the high school that does not have mechanical pressure.
Now, right? It's meeting the air quality standards. It's just that you want to go to a more current system. Is that what you're saying? Not that it's not functional?
That's correct. It meets code. In fact, it meets current code, but I know so does the ECP, and you guys were concerned with that, with the ventilation in there. So
right.
That's why I've put this item here in for discussion purposes to get some feedback from you guys. Many of these items will fit within that 1.4 million or so that we have left in headroom under that $5 million approximate bond referendum. So again, there's a lot of items that you could make an argument for.
Can I just ask a clarifying point? When we're talking about the air quality codes, I know at the beginning of the year, we did air quality testing in the school buildings. And what I don't remember right now is, was it tested for full occupancy? Was it tested for 50% occupancy, bearing in mind the 6 feet spacing necessary? I guess I'm wondering if we currently meet code, are we saying, because we have mechanical ventilation right now instead of the automatic systems, does that remain true when we have 100% occupancy? Cross your fingers, one day in the fall, if not sooner.
It does. It means that you still meet code because they were designed for 30 occupants in a classroom. And you have far less than that right now, typically. But even if you did have 30 in a classroom, that's what that room is designed for, and that's what the ventilation rates.
So the amount of air exchanges per hour with 100% occupancy would be fine in COVID world, as well as code?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did have one question going back to the roof replacement at Highview. Phase one, we said $450,000, if I remember correctly, and then in phase two, the balance is 2 million point something.
Right.
At that point, would Highview's entire roof have been replaced?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then the other portion of the high school, that would be a partial. And the thought process here, just to recap what you said earlier, is we would go through doing partials basically to each building that is deemed most critical at that point in time. And then at that point, would we go round robin around all the buildings, or would we do the Highview model and go and finish it off?
But you think
I would recommend that we want to target, do as much roof as we can afford to do up front instead of piecemealing it. It's not really the way to do it, but the way the high school's set up, you can isolate roof areas and work around it pretty easily. Ideally, you get your best price from a roofing contractor by giving them the more square footage to work with. So I don't think that we would make the recommendation to, spend the next 10 years running around doing $400,000 worth of work at each school. But, again, looking at how much you're looking to bite off each year, we could start to, look at each building individually at their costs and figure out how we want to, approach it.
I think it would make the most sense not to piecemeal each building, but go after the oldest roofs that are in the worst condition and knock those out one at a time. Actually, in answer to your question. So you start with 400,000 at the high school, and then as money becomes available, you do more roofing work at the high school because that's your second oldest roof that's in second worst condition throughout the district. So I think you would stay there, and then when you finish that, you would move on to the next building. So, I mean, you could use all 1.4 million and dedicate that toward the high school. That wouldn't give you 100% of the high school roof, but it would probably give you 60 or 70% of the high school roof at that point. So that's another option that you could discuss. Again, building envelope, very important as well.
Thank you.
Fred, I have a question. If you could just go back to phase one. I mean, actually, I think I have it.
Sure.
Okay. So currently your total for phase one is the 3.79 million.
No, phase one is 5.135 million.
It's phase two that has the space in it.
Okay, hold on. So, I'm sorry. Got it. Okay.
This is the energy performance contract.
Okay.
Sorry.
So phase one is 5.135 million,
yes.
But now it turns out that we basically have 2.7. Is that correct, David? That's what we have.
What just happened was we went over a bunch of numbers and said, hey, this 1.3 million or so for the mansion roof that we thought was unallocated is allocated. But we're planning on having between 1.3 and 1.5 million in next year's budget, right? Building it into the budget. So that'll cancel that out and we'll be okay, but we're just okay.
Well, that's
Tanya, can I update that? It's
ahead,
that
sure.
it's the 2.794 you just referenced, Tanya, from the capital fund, plus the remaining 1.159. So in the repair reserve fund. So that total is 3.953.
3.953. Okay. So
okay,
just write that out. 3.953, and then you're saying, David, we've got like plus another 1.3 from the budget for 2021, 2022. Okay.
Yes.
So that would be phase one.
We'll make it through phase one, right? And then there'll be some left over, unless, of course, disasters happen along the way and money gets eaten up by that. And it all does to a certain extent. And then you won't have to bond everything because you'll have some money coming in from the budgets. But then you'll determine what that is and you'll figure out what your state aid is and all that. And the actual amount of the bond will be a little bit less than 5 million.
Okay. So I guess I have two questions. My first question is, so how do we now move forward in terms of, are we supposed to make a recommendation to the board to implement phase one, which then would have to get on the ballot for voter approval? Is that the sequence of events here that we're thinking of in terms of phase one?
I'm thinking that phase one should be up for approval and adoption by the board. We already have the money. Anything that we have to do materially, I mean, it's not, we don't have to pass a bond in order to do phase one.
Right, but we do need
Right.
voter approval apparently according to
Budget.
Lisa.
We need to tell people what we're spending the money on.
Got it, okay.
But it doesn't need voter approval, right? Because the voters have already approved these monies for building work, correct?
So I thought it did. I thought that was the whole point of the previous discussion with Lisa, that we actually had to tell the voters what we were spending it on and they had to approve it.
Correct. When you designate money, so like, for example, the 1.3 was designated to be transferred to the capital fund for mansion roof repairs. The voters said yes, you're fine.
Okay.
So if in last year's budget proposal, they specified things like the playgrounds, et cetera, and then they said after those projects are completed, the board will determine other projects to be completed based on health and safety priorities. Does that cover the voter base?
The real question is, does the BCS cover? Right, so we have a gigantic list of building condition surveys items, 5 years, $89 million worth of stuff, and we're picking things from that menu, and that is emphasized.
You know what? Let me find out from our attorneys.
Okay.
So
Just
if
to
I'm
double
if
check.
Raymond is guessing, I'm guessing that we already kind of did the broad strokes for the public, and it doesn't need to go for a second vote. We will need to have similar
Well,
wording.
that was my initial question. To what extent are we already covered for just board approval, or to what extent do we actually have to put it back on the ballot?
Right. Because
Yeah.
to your point, you need to know by next Tuesday.
We have to have public hearings on that.
Right. I'll definitely, I'll call the attorneys and find out definitely from
So
them.
can that be on the board agenda for next Tuesday if you guys do need to put something in front of the voters for the existing monies?
Yep. I'll call them tomorrow, definitely.
So,
Thank you.
Chris, I think it could probably be on the agenda for
2 weeks later.
David, I'm gonna defer to you here, but I think we could put it up for discussion, right? On the agenda.
Yeah, it would be for right, because the next
public hearing, it happens after
right
the
next meeting is
at the last board meeting.
right. The next meeting is a work session, so it would go on for approval 2 weeks after that.
Right. So for discussion next week, and then okay, great.
Correct.
So we've got the timing right. And then when you're doing, sorry, I'm so sorry. So then when you're doing the budget presentation, once we get to the final version, we need to make sure we have wording in there.
Has to be specific. Yep. Yep.
So if we're counting, where I'm going with this, if we're counting right now, an expected 1.3 million transfer to capital in the 21-22 budget, we need to specify that transfer to cap, do we need to specify, besides that it's being transferred to capital, that transfer to capital is going to cover XYZ in this phase one?
Yes.
So do you need this committee or members of the board to specify what should be listed, or is that something?
Well, not yet. I mean, once all of the discussions are over and done with, and we know exactly what we have, then it'll be spelled out so that the voters know what they are voting on, why we want to put this much money into the capital fund. It's for phase one, and these are the items that we're going to pay for out of it.
And do we need to also list what anticipated monies from any leftover money from the proposition will go to? Do we need to kind of?
I'm going to find that out.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure there's no action points left unstated. Sorry.
Nope, that's fine. That's fine. And you know what, and I'm sorry, David, if I could just preface this with, if you think of anything after the meeting that you forgot, or you need clarification, or you want me to find out, just email me. I have no problem with that.
Okay, so at this point, the most contentious item in my mind is what do we want to do in phase two? but I think our recommendation for now, we need to gather more information from the public and all the participants and the students and everybody and his brother before we go forward into phase two. So I would say that phase one as revised should be our recommendation to the Board of Education for implementation, and we'll present everything to them, including EPC and phase two and the options for what could go into phase two. But phase one is our recommendation for now. That's what I'm thinking. Carol Allen, what do you think?
I was just going to ask, are we prepared to make the recommendation now that we move ahead with phase one? And once we agree on that, we have to talk about how we're going to fund all of the items in phase one.
Well, that's
right. Same thing I said. Okay, so let me ask, does anyone have any, all right, who's in favor of phase one?
I am.
I am.
I am.
I'm in favor of
I
phase
am.
and
Katie McCree? Jessica Muldoon?
I am.
Yes.
Okay, is there anyone not in favor of phase one? Okay, we have it.
You guys have to mute yourselves. Someone's TV is on.
David, are we not moving EPC along as well?
EPC, I think we already recommended.
Okay.
I have a, what do you mean? What do you mean we recommended? Oh, the energy, yeah.
We didn't change it, right? It's not changed from last time. We were okay with it last time.
Okay. I have something. So are you saying, David, that you don't want to discuss phase two? Because I kind of wanted to make a pitch for phase two.
No. You can make any kind of pitch you want. You can make any kind of comments you want.
Okay.
So what we will do is BBS architects will show up. They will present phase one. They will present phase two with the options because it's not nailed down. So everybody can look at it and think about it and decide what their opinion is. Okay, but the recommendation is for phase one and to move forward with phase one and the energy performance contract.
Okay. So I wanted to, I know that we spoke about this the last time and I was, I took the soft approach. So this time I'd like to be a little more adamant that I do believe that we should go for a very small bond for phase two. And I kind of wrote down my reasons for why I think it's better now than later, and why it's better to do a small one and then maybe another small one and another small one, rather than trying to do a bigger one.
Okay.
So my first argument is that, you know, we've gone through this year of COVID, and schools have been in the news a lot. And like many other school districts, you know, I think it's become very apparent to everyone that schools are in bad shape. So they're kind of front and center in the news now, and maybe there is more sympathy and more attention being paid to schools than maybe in past years. So that was my first reason for maybe it would be a good time to request a small bond from the community. The town is keeping its taxes flat this year, so maybe, you know, if we made a request for 5 million, that would, you know, maybe that would not be so bad. The argument that I made last time still holds, that, you know, we pass a bond and it takes a very long time to get these projects done. So the longer we wait, you know, the worse the buildings are going to get. I hear David's argument about, you know, the economy, but I also think that we might see inflation. So whatever the costs are this year, they might actually increase the longer we wait. I think that our community has had an influx of new homeowners. They may be interested in investing in schools because they may be interested in sending their children to our schools, and that would be great. And lastly, I think that, you know, because of Greenburgh's past experience with bonds, maybe we really should start small and build on our successes rather than, trying to go for something that, might fail again, which would be really unfortunate. So, so those are kind of my reasons for actually really going ahead with like a 5 million bond. I think that maybe we it could work, and especially with phase 2, where there's something for everyone, and it's really just consolidating our buildings to stop the bleeding. I think it's a good argument. So anyway, that was my pitch
Okay.
for bond.
And
Chris,
you can make
briefly
that
saw
same
your
pitch
hand up.
at the board meeting, at the upcoming board meeting. And we'll see.
Carol Allen has her hand up.
Because I know there are different people with different opinions. Go ahead.
I know, I'm sure. I'm just one opinion, but I happen to be able to express it here. So,
Very good.
Carol, you have your hand up.
I agree that we need to raise money for repairs, but I think that to ask for a 2% increase in the budget and a bond would be difficult. That would be a hard sell for the community. If you want to ask for a bond, I think you really need to try and hold your budget increase to 0.
Can I jump in on this also?
Yes.
I don't think we were looking at the economy realistically. We are not taking into consideration that at one time we were talking millions and billions, and now we're talking billions and trillions. We are not going to bounce back anytime. As a small business, a sole proprietor, you're talking about not working for 2 years. So when we do come back, I don't expect to see a bounding business in Florida, in the floral industry. And that's for all of the small businesses. And the county is trying to jumpstart by using different types of jumpstart the economy by grants and just to spend money. People aren't spending because they don't have and they're afraid. You have problems with the rental. I'm just saying, looking at the overall condition of the economy is, and the money that we have and we've already put in there, I think we should spend it for the repairs. I think that everybody realizes that we're going to have to do additional, but I just don't know really how you're going to come in with. I think you should start out at the lower amount and see how people can do it at the end of the first year and then come back later.
Well, so Pat, I
I'm
think
going for phase 2 and I don't have enough information. If I had more information, I could look at it as, in a different perspective. I'm just looking at what I see now and what we know we need. And the only thing I can say is the lottery is still running. Have we submitted any? No, I'm serious. Grant proposals to the New York State Lottery. Westchester County plays big. We're not as big as Chinatown, but that's a lot of money. And have we ever received any from New York State Lottery?
So I don't know about that, but I think I just...
No, but they give it out. And if they're giving it out, we should be in the number. Counting, that should be something you should look into. And they're not giving away $5. They're giving away good money.
Okay,
I'll look into that. I'm
just saying that for a $5 million bond, if it's a $7.63 increase per $100,000 of home value, I think that, it's maybe a reasonable amount to ask for just really repairs that would, I feel that we just can't kind of kick down the road because the building envelopes and the roofs, if they're not fixed, the problems are just going to get worse and it's just going to cost even more. So I guess that was my argument for doing a very, very small bond for, something that maybe the community could stomach, because it is $763 per $100,000 or something in that range, to really do repairs that will protect the buildings and will cost us less down the road to fix. So
that was my argument for doing it sooner rather than later. So.
All right. Anyone else? We have one more item that we need to go over, I think.
Well,
Okay.
I appreciate Tanya stating all those reasons, and thank you. You read my mind. I do want to go over the numbers one more time when we're offline, but I think, David, we can't move forward yet. I do think even if we don't go forward with phase 2, if the board decides they don't want to go for a small bond, I think this committee should at least outline what the committee recommends to the board. Even though the board will hear all the proposals, I think this committee should come to a conclusion as to what they see the priority as for phase 2. I don't think we should move on from here. I think Tanya's right. We need to have this discussion. Otherwise, we're going to have 18 months will go by and we're talking about the same thing again. And I'm tired of that.
All right. So I'll give you my 2 bits on this. And that's that I'm looking and saying, gosh, I'm fixing the roof on this admin building. And because it doesn't have ventilation, I'm not putting anybody into it. So I've got this big empty building. And I'm looking at the high school. And I remember that the high school used to have more space in it. And if I want to push in a particular direction, I would probably push towards getting the administration back to where they should be, in order for the benefit of the high school students. But I want to see what the high school folks have to say. I want to see what the administration says. I want to see what the teachers say. I want to see what the students say. I want to see what the parents say. If they think that it's better to upgrade the ventilation system on the high school and they value that more than opening up more space, then I might be persuaded to go in the other direction. So I want to go out and gather more information before I make a recommendation in any particular direction. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I feel the need for input on phase 2.
Well, I think you need to look at being as a saleable item. I would say, let's fix the roof, the entire roof of one building that's in the worst condition.
Mm-hmm.
And start there, regardless as to what it costs, but to do that, and then do the next one and the next one. But instead of doing piecemeal, like the gentleman said, do the whole roof. And when you do, that makes sense to people. You're not going to do a half of a roof on my house. Everybody, I'm just saying, if you want to sell something, you're selling it the wrong way.
Well, I think Pat, we went with the recommendation of our
architect. I know, that's why I didn't want to get into it. I'm sorry. I'm back me up.
I'm just saying that, I think at some point we have to trust them in their assessment of the greatest issues. And because we're strapped for money, that we will just have to maybe not do a whole roof, but we will have to fix the worst problems on all of the buildings and then maybe do another bond to fix the rest of it or something. And I just feel that, if we put this off and then next year or the year after we try, I don't know, 15, 20 million, whatever, it's not gonna work, because we have a community that's just become complacent and has not approved a bond. And I feel that it would be better to start small and show, that we're doing something and then build on our successes. So
one thing I will say in agreement with that is that if you set up a small bond and you pay it off, then the next time you go for another bond, you do it at the point that your debt is retired. Exactly. So then the next bump up is not so great. And we have no debt now. So we're not set up to do that at all, and we should be.
So my opinion is, and I mentioned it during the last meeting, so I'll reiterate it again. Tanya, I think that you have very valid points. I just don't see it happening this year, not only from a timing perspective, but from the reality of the economy we have going on right now, even locally. So my recommendation would be, as we said already, phase 1 and EPC move forward, and let's go ahead and start the conversation with the board and tell them, hey, we're planning phase 2 for next year. let's do that as the $5 million bond, because I think by the time next year rolls around, we'll have better information. We'll be better prepared to pitch it to our public and explain to the community why we're doing it piecemeal. Unfortunately, I agree with Pat Weems. I would love to just do one roof at a time, but we can't afford it right now. So that would be my suggestion, that we plan for phase 2 for next year. We get the EPC out of the way now, which is 3.79. We get the phase 1, which is 5.1. That's already 8 point something we're doing this year, theoretically, or whenever that gets approved. And then the next year after that, we do the $5 million bond. And then to David's point, once that rolls off, we issue another one, and we just kind of go down that road. That's the way I see it realistically passing through our community. But that's just my opinion.
And there's one more thing for us to look at before we're done. Okay, go ahead.
So I was just saying, I'm so glad we're continuing the conversation. Can I just say, whether we do it now in May or now next year, there's always the midpoint of this fall. As long as this conversation continues and we identify priorities, I'm going to pitch. Tanya's listed all the reasons why I think we should move forward. I like their proposal for phase 2. I would add in the other half of the high school, middle school partial roof to bring that total to 4 million. And I'd probably agree with what David's saying and maybe throw in the admin so we can get more space in the middle high school, since the mechanical ventilation meets code and meets COVID. And then that could go into the mechanical ventilation issues, which were phase 1 of the BCS, would then be our new phase 3. That's my pitch for the order of things.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we could try for a bond mid-year. It just costs more money because we have to.
Exactly. That's the downside.
Right. That is the downside. But I just, David, the economy could be even worse next year. I mean, I just don't know. And again, it could cost a lot more by next year to do things. And so I don't know. I always think that, now is the time. And I feel that these are very, very important repairs to do to stop. So.
All right, so it's sounding at this point like the ECP wing is out there in phase 3, but let's look at it anyway, since we have some preparation on it.
I have one more question before we stop talking about phase 2, please.
Okay.
It is my understanding from our discussion tonight that we are ready to move ahead with phase 1 because we already have funding in place.
Correct.
Except maybe something the voters will have to approve on, but the money is there. That would get accomplished during the 21-22 school year.
Yes.
If we don't ask for money now for projects, which will take a whole year to get through the approval process, we will not be prepared to do anything in the 22-23 school year.
Correct.
So we really need to plan now to raise the money so that we'll be able to do additional repairs in the 22-23 school year.
Yes, that was my point about how things take time. Yes, absolutely. Things take time.
Question, Mr. Siegel, how long will it take to implement phase 1?
If you get approval in May, the design will start. It'll go up to the state in the fall at some point. We'll get approval sometime over the winter, early spring. We'll bid it early next year and then start construction next summer.
Okay.
But would that be all of 5 million, Fred, or would you still have to look at breaking out projects?
I would say probably all 5 million. That's not a big chunk of work. I think we can get that all done.
Wait a minute. At the last meeting, you guys said you said now that if the money's approved in May, if these are monies we already have for the most part, and if we find that the notice we gave to the public last year is sufficient, which I think Lisa is going to try to know by next week, can the design phase start sooner if it has to be up at SED for 3 months for approval?
Yeah, we could start sooner if the money's available now. Absolutely.
There's one piece that I've got to push, and that's the ventilation at ECP main building. If there's some way to get that out ahead, I mean, because if people come back as COVID goes away, then
Right.
Then Highview suddenly can't hold all those ECP kids anymore, and we're gonna have to move them someplace, and so that needs to be done post haste.
And we definitely have that on hand, so. Right, Lisa? The 577, 575,000?
Can we take a step
Yes.
back for a second? I thought during our last meeting, we said that our interim plan for the ECP main building, since we already know it's a fact that we will not be able to complete replacing all of their ventilation with the 575 is not going to happen before September of 2021, that we would interim set up a similar scenario as what we did in RJ Bailey with the window fans and get some kind of ventilation as a stopgap. Is that not what we agreed on? I thought that's what we agreed on.
That was what I thought we agreed on as well, yeah.
And I talked to Mike, and he said, well, you know, because you have electric baseboard heat instead of steam heat, he may have to do some supplementary stuff to bring up the number of BTUs, but he thinks he can handle it.
Okay, so just a clarification point. I thought our architects told us that that building was sized to be able to do it, just obviously not in like 5-degree weather.
Correct.
So then it sounds like the whole baseboard supplemental really only comes into play if it's like 5-degree weather or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so then we don't have to do the whole ECP ventilation thing, at least not right away, right? That I agree with Ashley, that was my understanding as well.
So you'd just rather wait till the following summer?
Well, the reason.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, the reason why they said it wouldn't be done in time for the fall is because we thought we had to wait for monies to be approved in May, and the 3-month wait for SED was going to kick that into next winter. If we can start that phase sooner, it might be done before 5-degree weather hits next winter.
And not only that, but I thought you had that money to begin with. That's why I had to go do one thing at a time. But I think I thought y'all had the money. We had the money.
So I think the other reason that I would hold off on that whole expense in terms of ECP ventilation, because I think, that's a whole discussion that we need to have about what, really what we're going to do with ECP. If we're eventually going to build a wing onto LF Jackson for all of ECP, then why spend, what is it, $500,000 doing ventilation in the place that then we're just going to ditch it.
I'm just going to point out that the 577 that we just approved 30 minutes ago as part of phase 1 recommendation to the board, that 577 is the ventilation at ECP.
Wait,
so
where?
are we now going to go back to phase 1 and change phase 1?
Again?
Okay, yeah, you're right. So I'm sorry, I actually missed that, and because I guess I was going on the assumption that we had agreed, as Ashley said, that we were just going to do the stopgap measure, and I really think that spending $500,000 on something that in 2 years we might completely ditch to build a new wing or do whatever it is that we decide to do with early childhood to consolidate it somewhere else. I don't know, maybe in the mansion, maybe all in the early childhood center, but I just feel that that's it's not reasonable. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So at ECP this year, the main building was not okay for half occupancy because of the hybrid model, but we're saying for next year at possibly full occupancy, opening the windows as a form of ventilation is good enough.
So that was kind of my question to Mike Falcone, who came back and said, not only could we not keep the windows open, but in addition, if you do what we did in RJ Bailey, which is put in the fan units, then that won't quite swing it. We have to do additional work to make sure that there's heat. And therefore, it was a better option for us to move the kids to Highview since we had this.
But since nothing has changed, we're in the same structure building situation for next year at a higher occupancy.
Correct. So I'm in favor of fixing it, because I think that you can't build an ECP wing in a short period of time. And the only alternative that makes any sense that anybody has presented to me was, let's put in trailers at Lee F. Jackson and move everybody to the trailers. But I've been told that that's not going to work time-wise, both because of NYSED approval and how many hoops you have to jump through, and because there's such a huge long queue of other people who have already purchased trailers, so that we've been sitting there for a couple of years. So then that meant that the best option in order to make things be like they should be and have a quality environment for our kids was to go back to the ECP main building and fix it until we get to the point at which we can go ahead with the wing. And that's going to be a ways out given the economy.
So clarification question. I'm hearing, David, that Mr. Falcone's telling you we can't deal with the heating, it's not enough. And our architects are telling us we can. Which is it?
Mike is
I'm going with the architects.
We'll have to do something to make it work.
Can anybody hear me?
Go ahead. Hey, Mike, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've been having a hard time with my phone. Let me turn it off. Okay. Everybody can hear me now.
Yeah.
Okay. I have doubts with the heating system. Okay. Right now there's baseboard in there. First of all, it's not really sized up the way it should be. Okay. And they had to put electric heaters hanging from the ceiling in order to, maybe you can see me now, in order to try to bring up the BTUs. When it's very cold, a couple of rooms, they have a hard time trying to keep up with the BTUs in there. Okay, so room 1, it seems like that always holds well. Room 2 holds okay because they have a huge electric heater that's hung from the ceiling. Okay, the back rooms are cold. You go to the nurse's office, you go to the hallway, you go to the back room where I think the prep room is. The social worker, or there's 2 rooms on the side there. They have problems staying warm. Okay, it's an uninsulated building. I'm there, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you put fans in a window, you're going to freeze them out. I guarantee it. Just like I guaranteed we were going to be warm enough on the STEAM building on Bailey School. But let's go back to room 3 now. Room 3 has baseboard only on one wall. Okay, and they have a small electric fan. Room 4 was so cold one time I had to replace it. I ended up getting a bigger heating electric heater fan in the corner. So far that's been okay. But you open up these windows, you're not going to have enough BTUs to keep them warm. That's my expert opinion on the heat for that building.
Mr. HVAC. Yep.
So my point in talking about it is the same at Bailey. I'm sure when it's 5 degrees outside, you don't have the windows fully open at Bailey with the fans on blowing in outdoor air. Obviously, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You're going to have to decrease the windows. You're going to have to leave them open a crack in order to make that happen. Are you going to need to supplement the heat in the ECP? I don't know, maybe a little bit at that. Because it's not a STEAM building, so it doesn't have the same capacity, but that building was designed to have operable windows. So that was the design in Bailey, that was the design in Highview, that's the design in one of your wings at the high school, that's the design in the ECP building. So we might have to supplement it a little bit, but you're not going to be able to put a fan in there when it's 5 degrees outside and blow 100% outdoor air into those classrooms. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying. And there's going to be plenty of heat in order to handle that you are not going to be able to heat those classrooms if that's what the intent is. You're going to do that in the shoulder seasons, just the same way you did it at Bailey. You're going to do it in the spring, you're going to do it in the fall, and then in the winter, you're going to crack the windows open a little bit so you're getting some ventilation in those spaces, which was the original design intent of that building. And that's how you're going to get your ventilation in those spaces, not by putting fans in the windows in the middle of the winter. So that's what I was trying to explain. I apologize if it didn't come across clearly enough, but not a fan when it's 5 degrees outside. No, that's not going to work.
So what we're saying then is that we don't have a full plan for September for that building, right? Because I guess we do for the beginning of September, which is the shoulder season, right? But as the time goes on and it gets colder, we no longer have a plan. And then I guess that goes back to
what can we do in terms of supplementing the heat?
Exactly.
Mr. Falcone, what can we do in terms of supplementing the heat?
Mike, this is Debbie. You know, when we do put all the heaters on, then we blow the fuses in the building. Is that part of, we have to get that fixed?
You're muted.
Michael, you're muted.
You're muted. You need to... We can't hear you.
Sorry
Hello?
about that.
Go ahead.
I must have clicked it.
Okay, go ahead.
Deborah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, the electric is very old over there. You can't put these electric heaters on when they were too cold. We tried putting the portable electric heaters on in the rooms. They blow circuits. I still have doubts on trying to warm those rooms up. Can we get it warmer? The only thing I probably would try to do, I would add either a cast iron radiator or sunrad or extra baseboard, because they're not sized up right. I mean, what this is an opinion. What they did, they took a barn and they said, let's just make rooms in it. They didn't look at, is it for educational purposes? They just said, hey, let's put rooms here. Okay, so the standards are totally different back then. They just got a room, said, let's have some educational here in the kitchen. We'll make this a classroom. So let's put some baseboard in here. Is it good enough? Then they realized it wasn't good enough. They put these heaters that were hanging in there. I will try to make it work. I will try to get more heat from the boilers. I believe the boilers probably size up right, but the heat in the rooms are not. Room 1 has cast iron radiators. It seems like it puts out quite a bit of BTUs, which Fred and James know. A cast iron radiator gives out a lot of BTUs per room. But I would have to do something like that. I would have to get some rads, cast iron rads. I'll make it work, but I'm just telling you that if I don't do that, it's gonna be cold.
All right, thank you, Mike. Let me go back to the timing. At the last meeting, okay, presuming phase 1 as stated goes forward and that the board approves it, which includes the ECP ventilation issue, since there's no good second option to get full occupancy in all of our buildings as soon as possible, besides fixing that ventilation. Last meeting, BBS, I think you said you were going to go and find out if it could be, if the ECP air upgrades, fresh air upgrades, could be approved as an emergency measure if we're trying to get students back into buildings as soon as possible. You were going to see if that could be, if there was an exception that could be made.
So
yeah, there's we did contact the state and they came back and said, they to identify a project that's specific to improving the air quality in a room, into COVID, that you need to identify that on the project paperwork, and that you still got to go through the submission process the way it would normally go, but then they would pull those projects out of line and, give them preferential review or priority review over a regular project.
So that might cut down that 3 months that's the current queue to a shorter period. I'm just trying to figure out if there's any way this could start sooner rather than later. If we have the money on hand and the SED queue is shortened from 3 months, is there any way that this could be done by September or October?
I would say no, not by September. And so we have a couple of things going against this. We can design it. Let's say we get approval April 1st. We can design it in a couple of months. We send it up June 1st. let's say state only takes 2 months instead of 3 or 4 at that point. We get approval on August 1st. We then go out to bid. We get bids back on September 1st, and then we award to a contractor and he orders the equipment. The equipment's probably going to take 3 to 4 months to get there. So the equipment's going to show up around the end of the year, potentially beginning of 2022, at a point where we really can't take that heating system down and work on it. We now have to wait until the end of the heating season to be able to do that.
So we're still stuck.
So yeah, so
So,
unfortunately,
how much does it
it's going to
cost?
be next spring.
Right. So how much does it cost to do the supplemental heating and electrical work that's required to get us through the winter?
And how fast?
How fast? How much?
We'd have to look at it with Michael and try and figure that out.
And the question is, do we need to allocate some more money into this plan for that? And so that's our to-do.
So, David, could we just recommend phase 1 to the board with the caveat that we're waiting to hear about early childhood? And, I think this timing issue is really quite relevant. We can't do the work until the following year, and then the following year we might be asking for, I don't know, a bond to, build a new ECP wing, or, it's just, if we were really wealthy, we could, kind of do it all at the same time and then see how it shakes out. But I think $500,000 is a lot for us. It might be better spent, especially because it seems that regardless, we're going to have a stopgap measure for next year.
Okay, so to put that in perspective, let's very quickly look at the ECP wing option, and you'll tell me how long it takes and how much it costs.
All right.
So, because it's after 8 o'clock.
Okay, yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, so since our last meeting, I'm going to start with option B. Since our last meeting, we got some additional information from the district as far as what needed to be in an ECP addition over at Jackson. So what was discussed was 4 classrooms. So you see the 4 classrooms there. An administrative area that included 4 staff members, a nurse's office area that included 1 staff member, and then a therapist room that included 5 therapists. So it's down at the bottom left on there. You see it there. Yeah, scroll up a little bit, Jim. So where it says therapy, so down in that area. Okay. So that's kind of the educational plan, the program that comes out of what was asked for. And what we had discussed last time is that we thought it could be done for about $7 million. So if you scroll over, there's the math. So 4 classrooms does support about $7 million. It comes out to about 8,700 square feet. That would give you the ability to do 72 students full day at 18 students per classroom, which is the maximum you're allowed by the state. And then if you wanted to create a playground specific to that, it would be an additional $300,000. If you zoom back out again, Jim, we also discussed potentially doing some sort of a multi-purpose room. You can see that in the bottom right there. And that would be play space or whatever, they wanted to use it for. Again, not a requirement. I don't know if we really made a decision last time as to whether that was necessary or not, but we haven't included it in there, but that would be an additional 2.2 million. So we mentioned 7 million. Here's a plan that gets you to that 7 million with those 4 classrooms. Mm-hmm. Option A is if we really look at those spaces and we give them more room to spread out, you'll see that, option B, we compressed them. Option A, we expanded them. The nurse's office is much larger. The office area, administration is much larger. And the common area with the therapy is much larger as well. And because they're larger, we also included a storage space in the lower left-hand corner there. So because they're much larger, because there's much more square footage, about 3,000 additional square foot. If you scroll to the right, Jim, you'll see our estimates there as far as dollars here. So this comes out to 9.4 million, 11,700 square feet, exactly 3,000 more than the compressed plan that we just showed you as option B. Again, same number of students, same cost for the playground. So it's a much more, it's a larger therapy area, nurse admin, as opposed to compressed areas. So we just wanted to show you both. Originally, we came up with the 9.4 and we said, wait a minute, we mentioned 7 million to them last time. How do we come up with a $7 million plan? So we've created both of them for you to take a look at. We can certainly discuss how many square feet needs to be associated with any of those spaces. But this is kind of like a brackets, I would say, as to where you could be with an addition of this size or of this number of kids, somewhere between 7 million and 9 million, I would say.
And how long would it take to build this?
So it would probably take a year to build it, actual in construction. Maybe a little bit less, 9-10 months maybe, but I would figure a year just to be on the safe side. So again, if we start design, I don't know, I'm going to use May budget vote. I know you're not voting on it in May, but let's say middle of May. It would probably take us 3 or 4 months to design this. So it's going up to the state in the summer, say in August, end of August. It's going to go up to the state. You're not going to get this as a COVID emergency. It's going to take 3 or 4 months up at the state. So you're going to get approval at the end of the year. We're going to bid it early next year, 2022, and award it in, say, February 2022, start construction maybe in March when the weather starts to warm up, and probably a year's worth of construction. So you're talking about finishing up probably spring of 2023.
So even if we do that, it's spring 20. So if everybody decides that we can handle that big a bond on top of everything else, you're looking at spring 2023 earliest.
So Fred, I have a question. I don't mean to throw him. Well, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench. So, I most certainly understand. I mean, the logic for putting this addition on Lee F. Jackson, because it would be one less transition for the kids. But we do have the ECP main building and we do have the mansion. And we do need to decide really what it is that we're going to do with these buildings. Whether we are going to put central administration back or just leave them in the high school, or, right now I think it doesn't seem like having them there is a drag in terms of space for now, considering our enrollment. So I'm just wondering if we've never talked about this, but if it wouldn't make more sense to, especially if we are going to go ahead with these ventilation repairs on the main ECP building, whether it would make more sense to build onto that or turn the mansion into an ECP building or do something, to that effect there rather than Lee F. Jackson. I'm just throwing this out there because I think it's worth considering. And so if we're going to start investing in the ECP main building, then, continuing to build onto that and improve it might, kind of make more sense financially. So.
I would say as a general rule, yes, it would be less expensive to renovate the existing ECP building and or renovate the mansion in the area where ECP was.
Right.
It would be less expensive to do that because they're spaces that you already own,
right,
than it would be to create
a completely new
addition
space
of a similar size. Yeah.
The problem being that that the group we brought this up at the last meeting, and it's like the size of the group that fits into these rooms that we just showed won't fit in the existing mansion classrooms. You'd have to rededicate some portion of the mansion that's currently not got classrooms in it to classrooms in it. You could do that. It's just not as simple as it may at first appear.
I wouldn't suggest putting anything into the mansion in terms of like interior reconfiguration. I don't think you'd ever achieve what you would ultimately want. I think you're looking at a little bit of demolition and then adding on the appropriately designed classrooms connected back into the building. You know, like that little end, what used to be like a sauna room. I would just knock that thing down and then build something off the end of that, which would incorporate, you know, you take the 2 classrooms that you have and then add, you know, 2 appropriately sized classrooms, gives you the 4, but you don't have the nurse, you don't have the admin to support the program.
Right. And what about the main ECP building to sort of completely rent? I mean, that's a really magical space in some level. I mean, you could really, would it be possible to renovate that and build onto that? I'm just saying if that would be cheaper and also would kind of then roll into these repairs that we're planning to make to these buildings.
Yeah, I think with the ECP, the way, you know, the mechanical systems are described, it's, you know, you put the the $500,000 into that to get that up to code or whatever, where it should be. And then to add on, you know, you're probably looking at a little bit of demolition work to, you know, get the appropriately sized spaces and the amount of classrooms you'll ultimately need. And adding a little square footage for the administrative pieces of it, but not quite sure what the property looks like over there in terms of, you know, restrictions for that. But yeah, I would agree it would be an option to do it, you know, in that location as well.
It's not something that we have been asked to look at, but it's something we certainly can look at if that's something he's interested in. We can take a look at that building and figure out how to make that building better, if we need an addition on there to handle additional kids, and figure out what something like that would cost.
Right.
Is Deborah still on the call? Deborah?
Yes, I'm still on.
Could you just remind me, at Jackson right now, we have 4 ECP classrooms?
We have 5 ECP classrooms.
5? And that's in pre-COVID world. We have 5 ECP at Jackson.
Yes.
Okay, and then at the main ECP building, we have 2 at the mansion normally, or we used to.
No, we used to have 3 at the mansion.
3. And at the ECP main building, how many did we have?
We had 4 classrooms, the nurse, the administrative offices, and the teacher's room.
Right. Okay. And then I know here on these designs, we're looking at 72 students full day, 144. Maximum contractually, I think, is 18 per classroom. Well, that's by the state. I don't know what Greenburgh teachers say. But are we taking into account that we have some special ed classrooms that need, I think, 8 and 12? Just as far as occupancy for the number of rooms listed here.
Right. Altogether, we need 9 classrooms, which include 1 is an 8, 1 is a 12, and 2 are 16. And then the remaining are all 18. And we don't have any half-day students. We have 142 full-day students.
Right. So 5 at five at Jackson right now. So we need then, I lost the number.
You need 5 more classrooms. You have to be building 5 classrooms instead of 4.
Right. Just to see if these drawings are accurate with our actual, okay. And these classrooms are taking into account 72 students full day. And you're not.
They're all full day.
Is there a central air kind of issue in terms of expanding ECP as a separate building where you don't have say a Lee F. Jackson furnace set up, or is that not an issue? Are you getting anything off of the mechanical systems existing at Lee F. Jackson that isn't in existence at ECP?
Oh, I think we would have to put a separate heating system. If we were going to do an addition at ECP, we'd put gas-fired rooftop units or, you know, something like that on that building. Maybe even heat pumps. I don't know. We'd have to see what's available to us there. But we would do something separate. We wouldn't rely on the existing system there to make that happen. Or if we're renovating that system to do the ventilation, then we might have additional capacity in that in order to handle an addition.
So we can discuss all of this at the upcoming board meeting and see if we want to explore further options. But I would tend at this point to, okay, so I have one final question. Do we need to allocate additional funding? Well, no, we'll say that. We'll say we may need to allocate some additional funding for ECP main building heating and electrical issues, and we're studying that. And we'll go forward with what we've got here, unless Dr. Dragic, are you withdrawing your support because you want us to not do the ventilation, or what are you thinking?
No, I'm not withdrawing my support, but I think that this is worth a discussion because it's a good chunk of cash. I mean, if it were like, we were talking about 100,000 or something, I would say, okay, but this is like $500,000 that, I'm just kind of looking to be really sort of dollar efficient here in terms of what we're doing. And so that's why, I'm sorry that, I prolonged the discussion, but I think that's why I'm thinking, what is most dollar efficient? Is it to do the wing at Lee F. Jackson, or is it really to start the work on the ventilation at the ECP main building and then kind of build on that and just make that a full ECP building, renovate it plus add classrooms to really accommodate.
And we just have to study it and cost it out.
Right. So that's really my question. It's all about just dollar efficiency.
Yep.
I'm not withdrawing my support, no.
Okay.
But I would like to discuss that point with the rest of the board.
Okay. So it's now almost 8:30. I think we have our recommendation. I think we know what we're going to do at the May meeting. Lisa, we'll get together with BBS a little bit and see who does what slides when. But I think we have the general outline of what needs to happen. I assume we're going to go back, and I'm going to schedule the next meeting for about a month from now, and I'll come back with some dates on that. Is there anything else anyone wants to go over before we adjourn?
Just a quick question. When are we going to have? So I know Mr. Falco needs to get with BBS and figure out the future supplemental heating and the interim Band-Aid fix for ECP. When will we have that data back to the committee?
Okay.
I would say 2 or 3 weeks before our next meeting, if your next meeting is going to be in a month.
All right, 2 to 3 weeks. Okay.
And David, I have one question. We start registrations in 2 weeks on March 1st. So I just want to know realistically, because I'm going to get these questions. I am going to tell parents we will either stay in this Highview building or we're going to be put back in the stables. Is that, I have to give them, I have to give them some type of answer.
So what's happening? So we're about to have a presentation to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education will make some kind of, we'll hear the information and then go over it at the, and make some kind of a decision at the following meeting. So the work session, we get the presentation. The Board of Education meeting is on the 16th. So the plan at this point is, if COVID goes away, the only thing I've got from the administration, that is from the superintendent and the assistant from curriculum and instruction, who I believe is the COVID reopening guy, that we're supposed to try and make it work and go back to the stables.
Okay.
That's what I can tell you now. The board can come up with whatever it wants to come up with, but that's where we're at.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a comment.
All right. I hear a motion to adjourn.
No, Katie has a comment.
Katie has a comment.
Go ahead.
Just because recorded, and I know it's going to the board and it'll be other time to make the point, but for those who hadn't been at other meetings and whatever, to Dr. Drogic's point, yes, the ECP wing might, of a onto Jackson might be more expensive than maybe building on the stables, but part of the conversation has to be what other parents were saying other times about, does it make sense for transition, like from ECP and LFJ to all be in one building? Will you lose less students disenrolling? Can you study that? Two, is there, having it out of the stable? I don't know. I just think there's more than just the dollar amount that factors into the equation. So I'm just putting that out there.
Everything counts. You are
And
correct.
to be continued.
Yes. Okay, very good.
Oh, and one last thing about admin, because I don't, yeah.
Go ahead.
The admin building, though, you weren't going to put kids back in that building. I hope that's off the table because of
That's off
the
the
mold
table
and
for
all the
phase
other
one.
problems over there.
That's off the table for phase one.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Have a good evening. I look forward to our presentation before the Board of Education. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.